Hello everybody, before we kick this video off, I've got a bit of exciting news. If you go down to the description for this video, you'll find a link to where I'm doing a giveaway for 3 copies of GameMaker Studio 2. That's the permanent desktop license. These keys provided to me very graciously by Yo-Yo Games. Thank you, Yo-Yo. I know there is a bunch of you in my audience still using 1.x, so if you are thinking it was about time to jump on the 2.0 train, now is a chance to do so possibly for free. Just hit up that link, all the rules and the terms and conditions, all that. You have to just follow me on Twitter and on Twitch or one of those things, and you'll be in with a chance of winning one of those. It's pretty cool. That'll be running from when this video goes live for about 10 days. The exact dates are in the link below. But I'm going on holiday from basically when this video goes out for about 10 days. So here's a chance for you to get something from me even while I'm not going to be putting any videos out. On that point, I'm obviously going on holiday. I don't have time to make like a tutorial video these couple of weeks. Don't have time to be working on the action RPG because I'm going to be on holiday. So I wanted to do something at least for this this space of time. So that's why I'm doing this video, just to talk about something that gets asked a lot and something I think would be nice to kind of create a definitive place for people to come get the answer to, because this is something I've answered a lot. This is a question and a topic I think pretty much everyone, every game maker, tutorial creator, every kind of community person kind of focused around game maker has probably had to field this question or deal with at some point. And that's the question: can I build X in GameMaker? Can I build an MMO in GameMaker? Can I build a 3D game in GameMaker? Can I build an FPS in GameMaker? And so on and so forth. All right. The answer to the question, can I make X in GameMaker, is pretty much always yes. But half of the time, it is yes. It's just straight up yes, you can do that. This is a good tool, fit for purpose, and I recommend it. And the other half of the time, the answer is yes with an asterisk, or sometimes several asterisks. Because I think the question of can is very, very simple, but the answer can be misleading. Whereas the question, should you build your thing in GameMaker, is a lot more interesting, a lot more nuanced, and a bit more interesting to talk about. So, should you build your game in GameMaker Studio 2, or GameMaker Studio 1.x, or GameMaker, right? So should you build your game in GameMaker? A lot of the time, this question actually comes from a position of just not knowing much about the tool, and because I guess the name GameMaker and the kind of the image of the tool has, and even presents like itself through its marketing, is of a tool that makes creating games very easy, right? It's written on the tin, GameMaker, right? And people want to know like how far that stretches, right? It's like, oh, this makes games. Well, can it make this game? Can it make that game? And so on and so forth. And there is a stigma around GameMaker of thinking it is a very simple, easy, base entry-level tool that can't be used for anything too complex, that will have hard limitations, that will only be able to do so much. Because if this tool called GameMaker can just make all kinds of games, surely all people making all kinds of games would all use this tool, right? But they don't. So, there must be limits to this tool and so on. That's kind of where the logic takes people. Obviously, most of you watching this channel will probably know that yes, you can actually do quite a lot with GameMaker. There are lots of commercially successful games that have been made with GameMaker. I'm not going to spend this video defending the use of tools like GameMaker to make commercial games. I think those, I think the evidence of that speaks for itself. But what I do want to talk about is what projects are better suited specifically to GameMaker and the things GameMaker is good at, and just a bit about how you would decide to use a particular tool for a particular project. So, should you use GameMaker to make your thing? Well, when asking should you use a particular tool, I think the first thing you need to work out or to know about that particular tool is, what is that tool good at? What things about your particular problem does the tool make easy? So what does GameMaker specifically do to make game development easy? What problems does GameMaker solve in the field of game creation? GameMaker is very good at, I think, three main things. The first is drawing 2D stuff to the screen, okay? And by what it's good at, I mean it's solved these problems for you, okay? It involves the least amount of work on your end to get these things going, because that's the asterisk part of, like, can you make the thing, is how much work it is to make that thing a lot of the time. And it's very, very little work in GameMaker to draw something. Okay, whether that's drawing a sprite to the screen, drawing a tile set, drawing a map or a level, drawing effects, and using shaders and things like that, makes all that stuff very, very easy. Okay, it's all lots of built-in functionality for that. It's all built around that, makes it very, very straightforward. Solves that problem very, very well. You don't have to write your own engine for drawing all the triangles and drawing every pixel to the screen yourself. Okay, all that's done for you. It's good at that. The other thing I think it's good at is level design, and a lot of people will argue with me on this one. People who have spent ages building their own level design tools for their GameMaker games and so on. But I think since GameMaker Studio 2 and the new room editor, honestly, I really like the room editor, and I think it's got loads of great, useful things about it, being able to modify variables on an instance level, and being able to draw your tile sets and things like that, and preview animations and stuff in the room. I think it's solved a lot of that for you. You know, you could go off and write your own level design tools, but you don't have to. It's got a really good set of level design tools built in and available for you to use, so it solves that problem very well. The third problem I think it solves, and probably the biggest one, is mechanics, prototyping, and iteration, right? So like all together as one. I couldn't think of one. I guess mechanics you could think of as the one thing, right? It's very, very easy in GameMaker to get your mechanics going, to write the logic of your gameplay, and to get it playable and testable, and iterate upon it and see, and play with it and be like, is this fun? Let's tweak this a little bit and change this around. What if this enemy behaved like that? Actually getting the stuff going and behaving the way you want it to, very, 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 very fast in GameMaker to do those things, compared to other tools, the Unity or writing your own engine, or any of those other different things. It's very, very, very good at that. So those are the three things for me that GameMaker is super, super good at. And so if the thing you're trying to do, if the thing you're trying to make, if the problems presented to you are mostly made out of those three things, then you're going to have a very, very good time using GameMaker to do that thing. This is why GameMaker for me is the #1 tool for game jams. Okay, if you enter a game jam and you need to make a game in 48 hours, you have all the key components you need for that are solved very, very well by GameMaker. It's very, very good at drawing stuff, very, very good at getting your mechanics going so you can test it, iterate on it, make it good and fun faster than anyone else, because everyone else is still just trying to get those things working at a basic level. It's very fast for building your levels, and just everything about a game jam, and the things required from a game jam entry to be good and successful, all just solved really well by GameMaker. That's why I think if someone said, should I use GameMaker for a game jam, the answer is absolutely yes. And then you can extrapolate from that to realize that making most small games, like if you want to make a small 2D game in a week to a month to a couple of months, absolutely GameMaker is an excellent choice, because your three biggest problems are building levels, getting stuff drawn on the screen, iterating and testing, and implementing your mechanics and your gameplay, right? Those are the biggest problems, and those big problems are all solved by GameMaker. So one of the most common things people ask about is, can I make a first-person game, or can I make a 3D game in GameMaker? People like 3D games, and a lot of AAA games are all 3D and very pretty. People want to know, can I make 3D fancy AAA games? And this is where things get more complicated, because GameMaker can make 3D games. Yes. Asterisk. So yes, GameMaker has the functionality to draw in 3D. Even technically, it's always drawing in 3D. If you just rotate the camera around, it can kind of blow your mind when you realize everything is actually being drawn in 3D. But crucially, GameMaker does not do a lot to help you with 3D games. It has all the basic functionality. You can build pretty much anything 3D in GameMaker, but you have to do all of the work yourself. Unity, for example, or you're working on Unreal, you can import a model and then put it in your scene, your 3D scene, and you have it there in front of you. And it's done all that work for you, and it is already built to render 3D models off the bat. In GameMaker, you can't import a 3D model. That's not a resource type supported by GameMaker. But you can draw all the vertexes and stuff yourself. So what you have to do is, if you want to bring in like a .obj file or something like that, or draw a 3D object in GameMaker, you have to write or find someone who has written, lots of people have done this stuff, a script to interpret that model file and the texture files, everything, right? And draw each one of those, and then write scripts to then draw those vertexes and draw that model in your game world. And there's no way to preview what that looks like in 3D because the room editor doesn't support 3D, and so on. That's why, yes, you can do 3D games in GameMaker, but a lot of the work is made much harder for you. So the can is always yes, but there's always there is the asterisk. And the asterisk in this case is that GameMaker doesn't solve those problems for you. You can do it, but there are other tools that are better suited for it. That said, because you're working at this very, very low level when you're dealing with 3D in GameMaker and you're just drawing very basic shapes and vertexes and so on, there is a certain kind of 3D game when you're thinking like kind of really old school Doom, Daggerfall, kind of really early pioneer games in the 3D. If you're going for that kind of aesthetic or really, really low fidelity 3D style, and you're making something very, very simple and low level in 3D in GameMaker, and you want to do some of that work yourself, there are certain kinds, very, very, very thin slither of 3D games that I think are actually quite well suited to be made in GameMaker, perhaps more so than other tools. It's a statement, it's a little sketchy, I don't know how well I stand behind that, but I think it exists. I think there is a slither of games that could potentially be made better in GameMaker because you're already working at that really low level. You've already got if the game you're making requires that kind of those kind of techniques and that kind of 3D, it might be the tool you want, because otherwise in something like Unity or in Unreal you've kind of got to the tool could be seen as overkill for something like that. You've got to strip a lot of stuff away to get what you want. My lack of experience with Unity and Unreal means that I don't know, maybe I'm talking on my ass there, maybe it's perfectly easier to do those things in those tools. But that said, my main point here is that I think it's a very viable tool for a very certain kind of 3D game. Very limited though. You don't want to try and make something that's super polished and shiny with loads of like shaders and post-processing effects and stuff in 3D in GameMaker, because all that stuff you have to do by yourself from scratch. And other than just for the sake of, going down a mad enthusiast rabbit hole and seeing what you can do with GameMaker just because you can, there's not a lot of benefit to using GameMaker to make that kind of thing. That's what Unity and Unreal are built to do. Those are the problems that those tools solve very well. So that's 3D games. The other big one is, I say it's a big one, it's not as much to talk about with it, but MMOs. Should you make an MMO RPG in GameMaker? Should you build a World of Warcraft? And this, I think, is people just, again, want us to see what are the limits of GameMaker. Can you build an enormous, huge MMORPG in GameMaker? Now, the main thing with this question is that, and again, the answer is yes, you can do that. And I wouldn't say it has the biggest asterisk, but it has the most asterisks on the end. And now I can't talk too much about this because I don't know anything about networking. Well, I know a tiny amount. I know very little about networking, and I know nothing about like online infrastructure for MMOs or server-based games. And crucially, if you're asking this question, neither do you. That is the crux of it, because as with 3D games, GameMaker does not solve the problem of online infrastructure particularly easily for a developer, right? Most people I know who have attempted this kind of thing have usually used other like servers or tools in conjunction with GameMaker to do the online infrastructure side of things, and GameMaker is primarily then responsible for the client side, because that, again, it's the things GameMaker is good at, the mechanics, the rendering, and so on, right? GameMaker can do networking, it's got those functions built in, but again, it's not built to make huge online infrastructures and servers and that kind of thing. And again, if you don't know anything about those topics, which is fairly evident in asking the question, then yes, you might be able to make an MMO in GameMaker, but not within your lifetime or the lifetime of the sun. One caveat to all these things is that sometimes you may find people using a tool like GameMaker to do something like a 3D game that isn't necessarily suited for it, or as suited for it as another tool, just because they are very familiar with GameMaker or very familiar with the tool that they've chosen to use. That's also very valid. If you have a lot of experience in a tool, that the time saving and skill that comes along with that, the problems that allows you to solve much more quickly than you could in a tool that you're not experienced with, might outweigh the fact that another tool solves those problems better than the tool you're very familiar with. Okay, there's a lot of things to weigh up, and your experience with a tool can be a big one of them. So for certain kinds of 3D games and stuff like that, that's why you might see some people going through the effort to do that work and build the tools to import a model and do the stuff in GameMaker, because they're so familiar, they're an expert with GameMaker, they're not an expert with tools that maybe makes some of those things easier. The last thing I want to talk about quickly is, this doesn't get asked a lot, but I think is interesting, is the notion of should you build a big game in GameMaker. It's very hard to define what I mean by big, but I kind of mean things that take several years or require a lot of team members, and is generally quite deep in scope or complexity. And again, the answer to can is yes, but there are asterisks to this question. Now, obviously, I said near the start of this video, GameMaker is very capable of making commercially successful games, very good games, things like Undertale, Hyper Light Drifter, Hotline Miami. The list is endless and grows by the day. But you'll notice a lot of the successful GameMaker games are not overly complex. I want to be very careful with how I say this, because I don't want to be derogative about the games that have been made with GameMaker that are successful. I think it's unfair to call them all simple games, but they tend to be within a certain level of scope. And there are indie games made with other tools that have levels of complexity you don't often see with GameMaker games, such as RimWorld or Factorio, games with a very, very large kind of scope. That's not necessarily that GameMaker can't do those things. Again, the answer is always yes, asterisk. But GameMaker sometimes struggles to scale the project. Not always, but there are key ways in which other tools or other systems and ways of making games can scale other systems and paradigms that can be used that aren't supported or don't really work in GameMaker, because GameMaker encourages or constrains you to a certain style of development. Some of these problems are being solved in GameMaker, which is very, very exciting. If you want to know some of the specifics about this, me and Lazy Eye from OBJ Podcast did a bit of a chat about this in a video a little while back, about some of the changes Yo-Yo Games are making to GameMaker in late 2019. Wait, it's August now. When are you doing these changes again, Yo-Yo? Specifically, I'm talking about things like method variables, lightweight objects, exception support, and stuff I won't get into a lot of the specifics of. But the point is that experienced developers especially will notice some of the problems that GameMaker has when it comes to scaling a project. And by scaling, I mean things like, creating a project that can sustain a lot of complexity and still have a maintainable code base, and something that can sustain a lot of work by a lot of team members, and be able to merge changes well, and generally cope with having loads and loads of resources, loads and loads of scripts, and lots and lots of complexity and depth, while still allowing people to make changes and work on the thing. Because as any project grows, it becomes harder and slower to work on the more the stuff grows and gets tied together. But the way GameMaker kind of encourages you to build your project, and in some ways constrains you to build a project, a lot of your code necessarily sometimes begins to tie itself in knots and dependencies, to the point where it can become quite difficult. You can account for a lot of this just with very good coding practice and so on, but some of the things that are just built into GameMaker sometimes make it struggle with very large long-term projects. It's not to say that you can't do it, that you shouldn't attempt it. It's just that is one of the reasons you maybe don't see lots of really deep, complex games coming out of GameMaker. Because for GameMaker developers, often when the project actually gets that big, it becomes very, very hard to maintain. Whereas if it had been built with other tools, they might have been able to use practices that aren't available to them in GameMaker that would have made maintaining the code at that scale easier. As I said, there are some changes coming to GameMaker at some point or other, hopefully soon, that improve a lot of these issues. But it is something worth bearing in mind if you're deciding whether or not to use GameMaker for your particular thing. I know I said that was the last thing, but the one other thing I want to mention very, very, very quickly is people sometimes ask about, can I make a program in GameMaker that's not a game, something like a tool or a piece of software? And again, the answer is yes, you can. And, but there's an asterisk there. Think again. This one's quite simple though. Think again about what GameMaker is good at. It's good at rendering 2D stuff and animation and sprites and tile sets, and it's good at mechanics and logic iteration and that kind of thing. Do you need those things for the particular app or piece of software you're making? Maybe. For example, there's Pixel FX Designer. That was actually made in GameMaker, and it's a useful tool for GameMaker to do particle effects and stuff. And a lot of the stuff that tool does, it makes sense that they built it in GameMaker. The rendering of the 2D particles in the first place, and so on. The things that maybe struggled with, the GameMaker is not so good at for that kind of tool, is UI and creating all those little dialogues and stuff like that. It's kind of a pain to do that stuff in GameMaker. There's not a lot of easy stuff provided for you for that kind of thing. It's a common complaint by GameMaker users. UI and stuff can be a bit tricky. And chances are, if you're going to build a non-game piece of software in GameMaker, that's probably going to be an issue for you. It depends what you're making. But again, just consider the things that GameMaker is good at. Do those things apply to your project? In which case, GameMaker is probably a good tool for it. If not, maybe consider something else. But also, your experience with GameMaker might come into effect. So that's all I really wanted to say about this. Can you make a thing in GameMaker? The answer is always yes. Should you make the thing in GameMaker? The question's a little more interesting. And I think the answer of yes that I very often give to the question, can you make something in GameMaker, is a bit misleading because of the more interesting question of should you make the thing in GameMaker. And the answer to that question is still more often that yes than you would think. You should make a lot of things in GameMaker. You should definitely make Game Jam games in GameMaker. You should make 2D games in GameMaker, especially 2D games with a low scope. I think you should make most 2D games in GameMaker, even those with particularly high scopes. But later along the project, I have to admit GameMaker does have some issues with scale. Should you use GameMaker to make a 3D game? Maybe. It depends. Should you use it to do a program? It depends. Should you use it to make an MMO? Almost definitely not. There's a lot of different things and variables to consider for all these different types of things you might want to make. But ultimately, I'm not your dad, not the boss of you. You can go and make whatever you want. It's a tool, and it can do many different things. It's some things it is notably better at than others, but that might not stop you. So go ahead, make whatever you want. Can you make the thing in GameMaker? Yes. Should you? Up to you. Thanks, guys. Catch you next time. Thanks for watching, guys. Also, don't forget about the giveaway that I've got going on. You can check out that link in the description if that's interesting to you. Thank you, as always, to my Patreon supporters. You can see all these lovely people scrolling by now. These people are the ones responsible for me being able to do any of the stuff that I do. They support my work, and they're the reason it exists. So thank you to all of them. And thank you in particular, and in no particular order, as always, to Animation Spirit, Bowser the Dog, Burr TT, Carlos C, Daka Dondigo, Do What Doobie, Gabe, Giles Montgomery, Hare, Hyungjin, James L. Anderson, James Siggins, Jason McMillan, Joseph Wetmore, Kimo Savalampi, Lemon Escape, Max M, Michael Ward, Owen Morgan, Pierce, Relentless Rex, Renee Dam, Robert Churches, Rovan Darlin, Run, Rupinder, Sean, Shogo0410, Simeon Yayalegaglow. I'm almost certain I got that one wrong. Please let me know if I said that right. Cromulent Studios, Stephen Hagen, Timothy Hamilton, Travis Womack, Victor Stewart, Zachary Locke, Zephyr Flame, and Zinan May. Thank you all ever so much, and thank you again for watching. Catch you all next time.